Hello, George Fox family and friends. I am Shobaraka, and today we will be talking about what is wrong with this generation.
Who do they think they are?
Hello, George Fox family and friends. I am Shobaraka, doctor of rhythms and rhymes and linguist and laureate. But it's not about me. It's about who I'm with. And I am here with Dr. Carolyn Ellis of the Graduate School of Psychology. Mm-hmm. It is wonderful to have you. Our conversation before this was amazing. So if it's anything like the conversation we had outside, this is going to be a great interview.
I have big shoes to fill. My own shoes, but apparently I have big shoes to fill.
Well, I think it's going to be easy for you to do that. First of all, I learned that you grew up around wildlife rehabilitation. Yes. So how did wildlife rehabilitation catalyze you into the love of the human psyche and just caring for people?
You know, it's funny because you don't realize the influence of things of your life and childhood until they kind of come to fruition. But very little has had as much of an influence on my understanding of psychology and the human psyche as my work with animals. And especially with my mother was with the Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, and she still works at the Audubon Hospital. She's in her 70s and she's still killing it. Yeah. But there's something about taking an animal from its natural environment that is incredibly vulnerable, that does not understand the world around it, and trying to cultivate safety, but while also maintaining the integrity of its environment, and also recognizing that everything that you are going to give to this animal, it is going to take and leave with. It's not really going to give you anything back. It doesn't owe you anything. Gotcha. My mother used to say that it's almost like we're restoring the balance, because humans do a lot of damage to the environment just in our existence. And so there's something about restoring the balance, about kind of giving back. But you take an animal and you try to maintain the integrity of its culture and its environment. You try and care for it in a way that cultivates as much safety as possible, because it can be very stressful. It can be stressful for us to be in the hospital, and we know why we're there. Yeah. But then also, once you are done with all of the love, all of the care, all of the sleepless nights and everything that you've done, you release them back to the wild. And the gift was them going back to live their life. They owe you nothing, and they won't come back and say thank you. And that's okay. And so there's parallels to psychology, right? Yeah. That people come to me, and my job isn't to be the dominant expert and to, go in and restore and their lives. It's to be in relationship with them and care about them and maintain the integrity of their culture and cultivate as much safety as possible, so that they can eventually come to terms with the fact that they never needed me in the first place, and that they have everything that they need, and then they go back into the world, and my job is done.
So you made this beautiful parallel between wildlife psychology, but I'm also hearing great parallel with the gospel. Mm-hmm. How could you help me unpack that a little bit, in the sense that you're taking people and they're trying to make sense of a world that's chaotic?
Yes.
Right. And then you release them back in the world to be productive.
Yes.
And
knowing that the world is chaotic,
knowing
what they're entering back into. I cannot fix the world, but I can help to be in relationship with them in a way that's restorative, that empowers them to live in the world in a more effective way. Right. And that was Jesus. Yes. Right. I mean, not that Jesus wasn't perfectly capable of fixing the world, but that wasn't the point, right? His kingdom was to be on earth as it is in heaven. Our job is to engage in the restorative work of representing Jesus in the world, to be healing and restorative. Yeah. That's part of our work in this life, in this short period of time that we're encapsulated on this earth. And Jesus modeled that in being in relationship and always being compassionate, and again being present for you and healing. And it's funny too, because we all know that Jesus, I go running to Jesus like Abba Father, right? Full scale, hurdle into his arms every time something goes wrong. Yeah. But when things are okay, I'm like, hi Dad, I'm cool, leave it, I got this, right?
That is the nature of
and he has peace with that, because he have his great love for us.
Absolutely.
And so there's a truth to that too, that Jesus can hold the context of this chaotic world that we're in, and know that in his relationship with him, he's empowering us to continue to live in it, even though it's fallen and broken.
Well, let me to continue this thread of questions. Oftentimes, we don't see the need of even therapy when we're doing well. So in a sense, it's like when you release them into the world and they're in a healthy place, they're like, all right, thank you, Carolyn.
Absolutely.
But when things are chaotic, when we understand our limitations, then we retreat back to the help and the need.
Yes.
Why is that okay, but then also why is it good for us to, even in the good times, even in feast,
Yes.
that we need to still seek good counsel and healthy psychology?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, again, in the good times when we seek counsel, like, so in psychology, have you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
But again, it's like base physical needs. And there's a lot of truth to it. And I know you talked to one of my colleagues, Stephanie, and she's just amazing. But, the idea is that you can't go up to somebody who literally doesn't have food and shelter and be like, let's talk about meaning in your life. And they're like, I'm hungry. Right. I had a supervisor once told me, be careful that you never go up to a hungry person and say, don't worry, you'll eat someday.
Well, that's basically Jesus' principles. If somebody's
exactly.
in need, you
Feed
give them.
Yes.
You give them.
And so, but as you climb the ladder, as you sustain needs, as you learn to integrate into your environment, as you learn to cultivate health and wellness, you continue to actually go up the pyramid to meaning making, right? Who am I? What am I? What is my purpose? What is my calling? And that's where we need Jesus the most, is actually in times of threat. I mean, again, not that Jesus isn't the great physician and the great responder to all of our needs. But when my life is at its peak, that is when my calling is most actualized. And that is when I need his direction the most to move forward. And how do I be a healing and restorative presence in the world when I am myself healed and restored?
Yeah. I oftentimes think about when we hear sermons around calling and purpose, I think it's quite elitist because a lot of people are called to just to survive the
Yes,
moments.
my current calling is having a door that locks and a roof over my head. Like, can anybody help me with that?
Exactly. It's just, I am trying to provide for my family right now.
Yes, exactly. So, like, you know what? Yeah, I will get there. My calling is not to yell at my kids tonight because I am really frustrated. Yeah.
Let's pray over all the parents who want to choke their kids out.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It's okay. You are not alone.
You're not. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So we talked about trying to make sense of this world. Generation Z, there's an overwhelming amount of data about how they are the most depressed generation, right? How can you speak to like that data? What's happening with this particular generation, and how can we possibly reverse engineer?
Absolutely. And I want to open with the preface that H.L. Mencken is an American journalist, and I love, he has a famous quote, and that's, for every complex problem, there's one solution that's clear, simple, and wrong. And so again, it's like, is there any one reason? No.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and I've been talking to a lot of colleagues about this, and a lot of people that I've worked with in the fields of mental health and the fields of hospitals. My husband works in EMS and fire, and he's a chief. And I think two kind of common factors have really come up, and it's something our faculty have taught about. And the first is, this is a generation that has a lot of multifaceted trauma. Like, historically, we thought of trauma as like major seminal events, right? So if you talk in psychology, what we call a criterion A stressor, like it's this seminal event that kind of fractures your concept of the world. Like, people aren't safe, you know, oh, my parents aren't safe, you know, these major seminal events. And we have a framework of PTSD, like, oh, you were in a major car accident. Oh, you were assaulted. Like, that makes sense. But the current Generation Z, and some of it's just the exponential curve of technology and the world that we live in, they're more informed than we've ever been.
Absolutely.
So they know about all the trauma going on in the world, right? And then also they have been subject to such a recurrence of seminal events. You know, we had talked about, like, you know, every generation has their seminal event. Like, you know, my mother will tell you exactly where she was standing and what she was wearing when she found out Kennedy was shot.
Right. Yeah.
And this generation, Kennedy's shot every other day.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's something new and there's no recoil time to reinvent an identity. They just kind of move on from trauma to trauma, and it just compounds.
And also, if I can just compound that with, it's not only that the like a MLK is shot every day, it's also that they feel the need to have to resolve like the problems that caused that MLK.
Yes.
They got shot every day.
Yes. And this is something that I had the summer of podcasts, and that I'm learning too, is a unique part of the story of many people of color, is that not only are you obligated to grow yourself up in this world and make something of yourself, but you're obligated to also restore the environment for all other people. And not everyone feels that burden, right? And so Gen Z feels that, like, I have to make my life better, but I have to also make it better for all of Gen Z. But at the same time, they have been very, and I don't know kind of the cultural aegis for this, but somewhere along the way, we taught them, that deconstruction is the goal. And I'm all for deconstruction. If you've ever renovated your kitchen, you got to demo it before you renovate, right? You got to get rid of the old before you make the new. And there are constructs we have to deconstruct.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, absolutely. And you look at American history of women voting, right? Like, you have to break it down and build up something new. And we've empowered our generation to have the most prolific access to breaking things down. And boy, can they break down an argument, an idea. Oh my gosh, they can deconstruct anything. It is amazing. There's nothing that this generation cannot deconstruct to its fundamental parts. But we taught them that that was the goal, and they stopped there. Yeah. So they have this sense of, I can break anything down, but I have no power to build it back up. Yeah. And so we have a generation that has been empowered to deconstruct, but has no sense of agency to reconstruct, no sense of agency to build. So they say to you, I am a victim of the wars. I am a victim of inflation. I am a victim of all of these things. I have no control. I'll never be able to buy a house. I'll never be able to, education is getting too expensive. And you hear these kind of foregone conclusions of, and I'm not saying that there isn't truth to that. Like, inflation is out of control and houses are really expensive, right? But so you have this, like, they can break it down. They don't know how to build it up. Yeah. And then on top of that, we, somewhere along the way, our culture decided that comfort was an important value. And I'm not saying that comfort isn't important.
It is the road of least resistance.
Right. Comfort is real. And again, that's one of the thing that Jesus never withholds is comfort. When you seek out God, the pastor at one of the churches I attended many years ago at Beaverton Foursquare, Ron used to say, there are God has three answers to questions. Yes, not yet, and I love you way too much to do that, right? You know what I mean? And so, like, there are times when we seek out God for an answer and we are waiting on it, and God does not, quote unquote, deliver on what we think was right. Yeah. But there is never a time when I have cried out where I have not received the comfort of the Lord being present with me. So comfort is real and comfort is valuable. And I don't want to dismiss the value of comfort, but at the same time, that comfort is not meant to foster complacency. Yes. And growth requires effort. I talked to a vintner years ago, actually in Italy, and there's a grape called a Lagrange. I'm probably mispronouncing it. But he says that they actually will plant them sometimes in the side of hills because they have to grow out and then reach up for the sun. And he talked about, in very broken Italian, so, it's like, and English, and he said they have to struggle. It makes the grape rich. That they have to struggle because it makes the wine rich, and that's why the wine's rich. And I think of my kids, and I think of my life, and I think of the richness that has come from struggle, and not oppression, not marginalization, not slavery, not evil. There's no need to marginalize or oppress. Like, that's out. But I'm talking about practicing a sport. Exercising to lose weight, right? Struggling to learn a skill and falling flat on my face 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 times before I go, I think I've got it. Yeah. And just not receiving everything you want in order to develop character and exactly. And also learning an acceptance and a peace with what you have and a grace that comes with that.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have lost that. We are so comfort oriented that, again, you get to the stage where people are very hurt by the world around them, and there's truth to that. But the hurt becomes the story, and the hurt, and then combined with this, I can deconstruct, but I can't reconstruct. It's like, I can break it down, I can hurt, but there's nothing more that I can do. And it's like, no, we can struggle through, we can reconstruct, we can grow, we can rebuild. One of the things that makes America's history unique and special is our ability to go, oh crap. Yeah. We did a terrible job at that. What we did was wrong. Right. We need to do better.
Do you find that this psychological posture is more rooted in societies that are wealthy versus, and you grew up in, you lived in Japan for a significant amount of time.
And they're first world nation. Yeah.
Right. But you have more international experience than I do. But what does it mean to be a wealthy nation and your life is built on comfort versus other nations where it's like, well, of course we want comfort, but I know what it's like to struggle, and struggle is not necessarily, it's not a traumatic, it's not a a fatal event. It's
yes,
not
it's not fatal. It builds character,
builds
right?
character.
Like that. Every athlete will tell you that the first time they pick, it's like we talk to anyone in the NBA. The first time they picked up a basketball, they did not do as well as they are now, right? And it's interesting. I was talking to my students about this yesterday. That there is a unique paradigm in first world nations that I've seen of this, what we call the just world belief. This causal belief that if you do good, you'll get rewarded. If you do bad, you'll get punished. So if things are bad, what'd you do? Right? What'd you do to deserve this? Right. And if things are good on you. You obviously did something right. And if you go to the rest of the world, that is people don't say, why me? The same way we do in the rest of the world. They say, this is what it is. What am I going to do about it? Right. And so it's interesting because we have this artificial dichotomy. And by the way, the just world belief isn't true. We all know people who received good who didn't deserve it. And we all know people who received bad who didn't deserve it. But it works really well in kindergarten when you're trying to get kids to behave.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the kind of like meritocracy began to marry a lot of our theology more recently, because there are theologians who didn't even necessarily believe just because you live right, the Lord will bless you.
Yes, exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Like famine comes, and it's not necessarily because we did anything wrong. It's just
look at Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like things did not again, like things ended well for him in the long, but things did not end well for him on his time on earth.
He had to suffer.
Like, he suffered big.
Oftentimes, the Bible
for something he never did to deserve it. Right.
I have 2 kids on the autism spectrum, and I consider that a form of suffering, but I don't think it's a bad thing. There's nothing. Like, I'm not being punished.
But you face challenges that other parents do not face. Not that all parents don't face challenges, but yes, the challenges and the sleepless nights of worrying about your kids in a world when you are gone too. Absolutely. That there's so much truth to that. And so I think we have a generation, and it's like Philip Zimbardo, who is the famous person who did the Stanford prison experiment. He brought up he actually wrote a book called The Demise of Guys, and he talked about how we've as a culture, we've not treated men well, and we've crippled them in a lot of ways. But he actually said during a TED Talk, he was like, look, my job is to comment on the problem. It's your job to fix it. Right. But it's like here I am talking about the problem. And I do believe that there are constructive fixes. I do believe through practice, we can learn to tolerate distress again. And I do think that we can actually tolerate the discomfort of disagreement. If I were to say that there's anything that Gen Z could benefit from and that we could work toward as a culture, it would be the ability to come together. I call it like Google Maps, like zoom out 1 degree and you're going to find commonalities, but like let us sit and talk and wrestle with each other in relationship. Jesus wrestled with people in relationship, and we don't wrestle with each other in relationship anymore because we deconstruct, right? You said this, you're wrong, bad, done, I'm out, you're not my friend anymore. And that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it was Jonathan Haidt that talked about it, and I think it was Righteous Minds. I can't remember the name of the book, but how it is very difficult to teach this generation. Yes. Because of the coddling that has to take place.
Yes. And also the extremes. Like, it's like you get to a point and then you're off the cliff, right? Like it's not like it's not a graded environment. It's like you are either in it or you are off the cliff, and now you're doing damage control.
So we're talking about this collective health. You call it community health. And so, or it's called community health. So people can obviously come to you for individual counseling. But I want to ask you more about the community health aspect on the macro level. What are some things that you do or people within your field do in order to address some of the macro issues within psychology in our society?
Yeah. And I think this is, the APA would probably not agree with me. They think we're a little further along than we are, but we're still in our infancy of understanding community health from a true community empowerment model. Psychology is colonized. It is one of the most colonized professions. And I mean, again, it was white men transitioning philosophy into a science. And I don't discredit our forebears and their efforts because I think they did beautiful things. But at the same time, psychology was kind of born as a profession of trying to distinguish itself as a science, but also we are the experts and we are here to tell you how to be better. So people came to us as the experts. We told them how to be better, and they went and did the things that we told them to do. That mentality is long dead. That's not, and by the way, it's not effective either. Okay. Fun fact. You can tell people to lose weight. It does not make them go do it. Right? Less than 50% of all prescriptions are ever picked up at the pharmacy. right? So again, doctors can tell people to do things and it doesn't mean they're going to do them, right? So you get to this point where psychology has to dethrone itself as a domain of expertise and has to reconceptualize itself as an empowerment of the expertise of the people and communities that we serve. People aren't coming to me to be an expert in their lives. Sometimes they are coming to me to ask me, like, is this a problem? Is this normal? Is this crazy? Is something wrong? And I do, like, thankfully, I do have the expertise to tell them, no, that's incredibly common. Like, you're normal. And like, guess what? I have a degree that tells me I can tell you you're normal, right? So I'm not saying that I can't like diagnose autism or diagnose ADHD. Like I can talk about those things, but this historical mentality of psychology is going to pose itself as the hero and provide knowledge and education to the community, and they will absorb it, take it, incorporate our cultural norms as their own and heal. It needs to go. So community health, it used to be that community health was community education, community expertise being perpetuated to the community. Now it's entering into the community. It's shared models of governance. It's coming as consultant, not expert. It's coming as a person at the round table to share a degree of knowledge with the people who have the knowledge already. So community health is communities growing and reestablishing cultural identity together. It's communities healing based on their own cultural narrative and norms and what matters to them. And you look at this in like indigenous populations and communities of color, that we are there to help empower and foster access to resources and to be a consultant at the table of the collective knowledge of the group that we are working with to bring psychology to them as a resource, not to gift psychology as experts. And so you'll see that the models are now changing, and psychologists are doing after hours, and they're doing clinics, and they're helping people get access to immigration attorneys, and they're helping people fill out SNAP paperwork, and they're helping them navigate systems, and they're helping them to empower based on their own value systems. So I think community mental health has a long way to go. Because especially in Oregon, we're still in the model of money dumped on counties to provide individual therapy. And that's not the way to go. So the money needs to go to the communities to empower and restore deficits in the communities. And then models of mental health can integrate into that for the people who need individual therapy, for the people who may need a group modality or structure. And so we're working on it. But it's not where it needs to be. Our tendency is still to provide an expertise model and to disseminate information, but we need to join. That's what we need to do. And we're getting better at it, but we have to break with our own individual American culture, rugged individualism, right? Like that the individual is the focus of control, and recognize that the individual in their layered ecological context has many needs, and that we can address all of them.
Well, one of the things that I see as a great concern is we're tethered to these little devices. Constantly. Right? We stare into them, we live through them, and we're just overstimulated, not only by these things, but we step outside. There's so much within our spheres of influence that just keeps our attention. And you talk about eco-psychology. So how does your rootedness in nature help heal psychological wounds, to remove us from all the amazing technological advances that we have? They're great. They make our lives much better. But however, there's something about nature, apparently, that heals us. Can you talk to us about that?
And so I would be remiss if I didn't comment that there are people who have far more expertise than I, but in terms of my knowledge of this, and shout out to my colleague, Amber Nelson, Dr. Amber Nelson in our program. She's getting her certification in eco-psychology.
She's coming in right now.
So, but the idea being that there's something about nature, and like if you think of a kingdom mentality, I think that they tie into each other, is that who and what we are, like we're taught that we're the center of the universe.
All right.
And we are not.
All right.
And that's okay. It's okay. Like, by the way, there's nothing, it's like when you talk about in Christian faith, like the joy that comes from submission and the freedom that comes from submission, and people look at you and go, what are you, those two words do not match, right?
I think the Bible starts off with, in the beginning, God.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And me.
So, and so this idea that like when you enter into nature, first of all, like, and I tell people whenever whenever people ask me about, especially like, like seeking faith, right? And they say, like, how do I make connection with God? And I'm like, God is not playing hide and seek. God does not play holy hide and seek. He plays always found, right? I know,
always
he's
found.
Always there. And so when you ask for God, ta-da, right? Like you're like, oh, you've been there the whole time, right? And so this idea of when you enter into nature, the grass was there, like the grass was growing before I got here, and the grass will keep growing after I leave. Yeah. There are trees on this planet older than most of us, right? And so this idea that the kingdom was brought about and has existed outside of us. And we are, even though we are stewards of the kingdom, we are not the agents of the kingdom's origin or its downfall, right? The earth was here before, like, God made it first, right? Yeah, and it generally outlasts us. And so this idea of entering into nature and understanding your place and the connectivity of the world around you and your place in it, and that there is freedom sometimes in the obscurity of it, right? It's like, I am not the agent of control. I am not supposed to solve all the problems of the world. I am not the be all end all. I'm not the beginning and the end, right? I am just a part of this big, beautiful kingdom that the Lord created. And my job in it, like, I have worth in existence. As I say a lot, like in the United States, where we believe a lot about being human doings, but we really struggle with being human beings, right? And so this idea is like, in nature, you can be a human being. You can be, and your existence is good. He looked upon it and said that it was good. Also, nature, so I don't know if you know this about like tree systems, but I love this. So like, I don't know if you've ever heard that like fungi is like the vascular system of the planet, but we do know that trees will communicate with other groups of trees through vast underground networks of fungus and root systems to warn them when blight is coming, to warn them when bugs are coming, to warn them when fires are happening, and that the forest communicates with itself. So there is an interconnected sense of, I am obligated to you and you are obligated to me. I have a wonderful Hispanic patient that I work with who talks about familia is I do for you, you do for me. And he says that the universe and nature knows familia. She knows that she is interconnected and that the good of all is the good of one and the good of one is the good of all. And there's something that communicates to us. So that sense of I am a part of something bigger, and the bigger is interconnected and cares about the whole. Is, I think, really valuable. And I think it models that kingdom mentality.
That's excellent. What has fostering taught you about empathy and our relationship with a loving parent?
Oh, yes. So all the things, it's interesting. And now actually the model is moving to, we're being called resource parents. Okay. So it's resource and adoptive families. Okay. And the resource and adoptive family training is raft, like floating down a river. I love it. Okay. I absolutely love it. But this idea, again, it goes back to, first of all, checking my own cultural norms and expectations. It's been very, very good. And recognizing too that, again, my job, the restorative nature of anything is relationship first. And Jesus knew this. It was relationship first. Jesus never banged down a door and said, you do exactly as I say, right? He said, he volunteered. He said, if you want, you can come and follow me. But he would sit with people and chat and have dinner with them, right? And he would be in community and he'd have conversation. So it was always relationship first. And I think many of these children are coming from extreme disruption, transition, not knowing where they are, where they've been, not having any of the developmental norms, right? Some of them, I have 9-year-olds who behave like they're in their 30s. And I've had teenagers who have behaved like they're very, very young. But they've never been taught. And my job is to enter into relationship in a restorative, stabilizing sense. My job is to say, like, I am here to ensure that you have food, shelter, clothing, access to education and safety. But furthermore, I will be stable when you are not. I will hold when you feel that you're unraveling. And it's a like, I don't want to say it's a burden, like it's an obligation to be in my own healthiest space and to aspire to be a better parent. But there's something really profound about what these children have taught me about how to be a person and how to be a whole and complete person in the presence of their adaptive resilience to the environments that they've been in. And I see it, honestly, Gen Z feels like, we have a saying in foster care, parentified children. So you'll have like the older children who learn to take care of the younger children in the absence of parents, and they become parentified. They take on the role of parent before their time. Yeah. And Gen Z in some ways feels like a parentified generation. Students come in and they go, I don't need you. I already know what I'm doing. And it's like, I'm here as an instructor and a faculty member to help cultivate your growth in this area. Yeah. But they're like, I don't need you. So because of my care in foster care, I can hold that and say, how did we fail you as a society to get you to the point where you feel it's all on you? Yeah. And what can I do to cultivate trust in me to join with you in growth? And so I think that cultivation of trust is really, and the holding and it's not about me, it's about this person and it's about what they need, has really gone a long way to shape me as a person.
Excellent. Excellent. I find that many pastors and churches do a lot of counseling. The whole position of a pastor oftentimes is counseling people through difficult life circumstances.
Yeah. No, right? my pastor will tell you, yeah, absolutely. Have him on speed dial.
But however, many pastors aren't either qualified or they have no desire to actually pursue counseling degrees or have people who are clinical professionals on staff or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Why is that? And what can churches do in order to integrate more of people like yourself into the ethos of the church so that they can be counseled?
And I think, there is a historical dichotomy. There is a historical opposition and antagonism that you will find if you read some of the writings, like some of the things Freud had to say about religion were not kind. Mm-hmm. However, if you also look at the context of the time, because a lot of Freud's work was with hysteria and neuroses and kind of in a lot of ways, like, again, Victorian white women who were very unhappy. Gotcha. And back then, the resolution of that was to put them in an asylum, give them like cold water therapy or cut out their uteruses, right? Like it was the concept of how we treated people was not good. But he would see like people trying to adhere to religion and religious asylums in the past, the concepts of demon possession, telling people you're not trying hard enough, you're not praying hard enough. This is not new. Mm-hmm. And so psychology in some ways framed itself as a profession of countering the damage done to people's psyches by religion, assuming that it was their failing, assuming that pathology was they were wrong people, they were born wrong, they were from wrong families, or they were demon possessed. And so in some ways, psychology poised itself in the beginning as a savior from some of the damaging actions of religion. So there's a piece of history there. They aren't willing to acknowledge that the Catholic Church started social services, and a lot of what we know of hospitals and our current mental health systems were grown by the church, and Quakers reformed the prison system. We're not willing to acknowledge that. So like there's, it's like, hey, right, both of us need to be at the table together. But I do feel in my experience of kind of some of the antagonism between faith and psychology has been the idea that psychology believes in kind of the ultimate role of the individual, and faith believes that the individual is obligated to something greater than themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that the two of them have felt that that's fundamentally incompatible. Gotcha. That faith talks about, again, it talks about a servant's heart and kind of a willingness to forfeit aspects of yourself to the greater whole in ways of salvation, right? Is to like to fundamentally admit, like, I am a broken person. I do terrible things. Right. I have terrible thoughts, and yet I am redeemed, and I am good, and I am made in the image of God, and there is grace for me. Amen. And psychology might say, you don't no, you are not fundamentally broken. Like, you don't need to be made in the image of anything else. You're good and whole and complete in and of yourself. And historically, the two of them have felt like that's an opposing characteristic. And I don't necessarily think no, we are made in the image of God. Like, what is a friend of mine from Texas literally said, God don't make no junk, right? And it's like one of my favorite quotes, right? God don't make no junk, right? And so it's like, I don't think that, but again, they continue to frame and see themselves as fundamentally incompatible. And there are times when I felt like pastors have really felt like psychology, it exonerates, like it highlights the value of the flesh and rugged individualism and being your own person, and yet being in relationship with Jesus is a form of humility, that psychology does not highlight the humility of faith, and that they're incompatible. And the beauty of our program is our doctoral program at George Fox is one of spiritual and faith-based integration. Amen. And we believe wholeheartedly that psychology is intimately rooted well in faith, and they integrate so beautifully and well. They're like Oreos and milk. It's great.
The both hands.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like we're like, no, you're wrong. This is great. We can do this great. Come show, like we'll show you. And so, but I do think that they have historical context, and I don't think they're fundamentally incompatible, but I think the narrative has been that they're incompatible. And I think, for pastors, I don't envy, it's, I don't know if you've seen the movie Talladega Nights, but yeah. When he's like, don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. It's like anytime people are like, pastor, I'm like, don't you put that evil, like to be a pastor, like, ooh, I will take being a psychologist at a psychiatric inpatient unit. Okay. I will take being a foster parent over being, but it's this idea of, because again, you are the person people go to in their most dire moments, and you are far more accessible than we are. We have office hours. Pastors don't. Yeah. But I do think of the pastors I know who have aspired and tried to integrate, that they're willing to have those conversations, and they're willing not to see psychology as an opponent, but to see psychology as an extension of Jesus's healing on the earth and an extension of relationship. But again, going back to that, we need to be able to sit and have conversations. And religion needs to acknowledge the damage that has been done by toxic manifestations of religion.
Absolutely.
And psychology needs to acknowledge the damage that has been done by dichotomous and antagonistic viewpoints. And neither of them are willing to admit at this point in time. I hope they get there.
Amen.
I hope they get there.
Well, speaking of getting there, we're about to get to know you a little bit more intimately.
Okay.
With these kind of rapid questions.
Okay. All right.
It's semi-rapid.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
So, you are locked away for, we're not in prison because the Quakers have reformed it. So therefore you are now, but you're in nature.
Okay. All right. I'm out in the woods.
You're out in Yellowstone. You're just
cool. Yeah.
Just perusing, just talking to the trees, but you're by yourself and you have one book that you can read during that period of time. What book is this?
Oh, I did not see that twist coming.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Oh, that's hard. Like, I'm supposed to say the Bible, but I'm not going to say the Bible, just so you know. Like, I know, everyone, I can acknowledge that I'm supposed to say the Bible. No, because the
word is in your heart. So
yeah,
you don't
thank you. I appreciate that.
Gotcha.
The word is everywhere, right? Yeah, absolutely. I have. So going through, like, there's fiction, the book that has really, and I've read it again and again. It's one of those books that speaks to your heart a different way every time. There's a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. Okay. And he is a psychiatrist who actually came to the faith later. So as opposed to starting in the faith and entering into psychology, he started in psychiatry and entered into the faith. But he talks about the road less traveled, and kind of it's a model of integration of how do you take the concepts of healing and wellness and love and fidelity and all of those things, and how do you do them well from a psychologically healthy standpoint while also incorporating the humility of being a Christ follower. Yeah. And that was, but in a way that like literally anybody could read this book and find fruit from it. Amen. Yeah. And so that book, I'm just thinking like, no, if I were in the woods right now and reading that, like I'd be really, really happy because it would be shaping me and I'd be growing and I'd be challenged.
Well, while you're in the woods, you have access to DoorDash or
all right.
Or Uber Eats. But the problem is they can only deliver one meal to you. It's over and over and over again.
Oh, no.
What is that one thing?
Okay, but I don't have to worry about any nutritional deficits or malnutrition.
I mean,
right?
We've had some terrible answers. So
okay, all right.
I'm pretty sure you'll be better than those.
Because like there's a part of me that's like, well, then I'd have to order something balanced that could sustain me. But I'm going to pretend that the Lord will sustain me fully and that there's no nutritional
and
need
you can
for
eat
this.
Some leaves and
so
like plants
I'm going to go for like fluffy IHOP pancakes. like fluffy IHOP pancakes with butter and syrup. Okay. Absolutely. That's what I'm going to go for.
Bread on bread on bread.
Yeah, bread on bread on bread. Bread. Okay, wait, no, carbs and fat and sugar. Okay,
all
like
right.
carbs
Good
and
stuff.
fat. Yeah,
hey,
no, like
I'm not too mad at that answer.
If you want like that's comfort food right there for me. Like big old, and by the way, like not a common thing in Japan. So like when I discovered like big fluffy IHOP pancakes in the U.S., I'm like, I'm doing this.
Gotcha.
This is my reward food.
IHOP at it.
Yeah.
Just specifically IHOP.
It doesn't have to be IHOP, but they have really good pancakes.
I hear you.
Like I'm cool with IHOP pancakes.
We're going to drop. So as you are eating your pancakes, we're going to fly a helicopter over the woods and drop an old iPod.
Okay.
But it only has one song.
Oh no.
No, we'll give you an album. It has one album on it. And so this is the only song while you're reading The Road Less Traveled, eating your pancakes.
Oh.
What are we listening to?
What are we listening
What's the
to?
soundtrack of us gaining so much weight over this period of time?
Thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement. I'm walking in the woods, man. I'm burning it off.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you are. You may be climbing some redwoods. So, yeah, you're good. You're good.
Let's see. I would go with James Taylor's Greatest Hits.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Singer-songwriter. Absolutely love it. No, my mom and dad, huge fans of James Taylor. And if I listen to James Taylor, I think of my childhood. I think of road trips. I think of my dad. My dad passed several years ago. I think of my mom. So like, it's just like a kind of a narrative story of my life with all the good memories would be James Taylor's Greatest Hits.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So as you're climbing these redwoods, it's amazing because you get to see over the whole of the national forest. But in the distance, you get to see like a drive-in theater. But the problem is there's only one movie that's showing. Night after night after night.
I'm gonna need therapy after this.
What film are they showing at this drive-in theater?
All right. This is like a favorite film, something I could watch over and over and over again. It's going to be Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
All right.
One of the best movies ever made.
All right.
This is good stuff right there.
There you go. It's a good one.
Oh, so good. Man, somebody asked me actually at a retreat recently, like if you could rewatch any movie for the first time. I'm like, oh yeah, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Last Crusade.
It's a good movie.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what's a healthcare? Sorry, not healthcare. What is a self-care practice that you've had to kind of give up everything else, but this is the one self-care practice that you can continue to repeat over and over
that's
again?
easy. So literally I bought my house many years ago when houses were way more affordable. But it has a soaking tub and an Epsom salt soak, right? A bubble bath with Epsom salts, man. I could do that every day.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh man, that is, I have a subscribe and save repeat delivery of 19 pounds of Epsom salts to my house. Okay. Like this is like, I am keeping the Epsom salt single-handedly in business.
There you go.
They're gonna like make a monument to me. Yeah.
So George Fox family and friends, what I heard is be the salt of the earth. Talk to the plants and the trees because we got to be involved in nature. George Washington Carver actually spoke to plants and said that he actually talked to the plants. He said it gives up its secrets when you talk to it.
Oh, very nice.
And it seems like Dr. Carolyn Ellis is doing the same. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Dr. Carolyn Ellis.
This video podcast is a production of George Fox Digital. To find more material like this, you can subscribe to George Fox Talks on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Our team really appreciates your feedback in the form of likes, comments, and reviews, and we'd really love to hear what you think. To sign up for our weekly email list and to keep up to date with the latest episodes and publications, you can check us out on the web at georgefox.edu/talks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.